I'm working on this 1957 Boland's garden tractor. I'm going to use this opportunity to talk about adjusting the governor on your older Kohler K-series engine. This one happens to be a K161, a 7 horsepower. The procedure is the same for all the older Kohler K-series engines. On this tractor, somebody completely bypassed the governor. The throttle cable's connected to the carburetor. The governor is still connected, but it can't do anything with the throttle cable connected like that. It looks like all the parts are here, so I'm going to put this stuff back like it's supposed to be and try to make it work right. This tractor's been sitting for a long time. The throttle's locked up, and the choke is locked up. I'll take all that off and fix it, but for this video, I'll stay focused on the governor. I want to take this arm off and make sure everything's good under there. I can't get the wrench on because this spring's not in the slot like it should be. This is the end of your governor spring, and it needs to be in that slot right there. That's something to watch for when it goes back together. I can get the wrench on there if I flex the spring a little bit. When you loosen the brass nut, this arm comes off. That's where the throttle cable's supposed to be anchored down. In this video clip, I'm working on getting that exhaust flange off. And that's when I removed the brass bushing and throttle disc just to get them out of the way. There should be a little washer behind the brass nut. Don't lose that. I'm going to leave it on the shaft. This shaft won't come out of this hole, but if you pull it out and turn it the wrong way and put it back in, you can get it back in wrong. So just try to not turn it much and push it back into the hole so it don't lose position. Now I'm going to put this back together. Make sure the little washer's in position. Then the brass bushing goes through the throttle disc and screws in the hole. The brass bushing seats against this cable bracket, so that has to be in there every time you tighten the brass nut. The position of the arm don't matter yet. I'll need to adjust that later. Make sure the round disc turns easily after the bushing is tight. This one feels like it's rubbing on something. Sometimes this cable bracket gets in the way. And that's what it is. If I hold this bracket back, I can turn it easy. So I need to fix that cable bracket. Yep, it's bent there. You can see where the original bend was. It has to be flat below that. That should work. There's a bend in that part to help line up the cable with the movable disc, but the bend is above that disc. It has to be flat behind the disc. That's good there. I'm blocking the camera here, but also make sure the shaft is free to move. It should go in and out a little bit and be able to rotate easily. I'm ready to put the governor arm on, and I'm going to use this new linkage I made. The other one had one end broken off. When I took this apart, this spring was not in the slot on the disc there. So make sure the spring is in the slot when you put it together. I put the linkage wire in the lower of the two holes on the governor arm, because that's the way most of them work best for me, so I try that one first. Sometimes the other hole works better. You might have to experiment. Once you get this on there, I like to make sure there's a slight gap behind the arm. I'll use this screwdriver to create a gap back there. I just don't want it rubbing anywhere it doesn't need to. With the spring engaged in that slot properly, the governor arm and that disc back there move together. I'm going to tighten this nut here because I'm getting ready to clamp that in place. What you want to remember is everything is timed together at full throttle. So looking at the shaft, full throttle is in the counterclockwise direction. So I'm going to rotate the shaft counterclockwise with the pliers. Now if I put one wrench on top here and push down with my finger, that forces the arm to the counterclockwise position. And at the same time you're pushing downward on the shaft, holding it in the counterclockwise position. Then you can use your other hand to tighten the nut while both parts are held in place. Now all those parts are in time with each other properly and should be able to flop back and forth with no resistance or binding. This cable mounting arm is made to be positioned wherever you need it, so it would be pointing upward if your throttle cable came in from the top. After looking at my other 57 Bolins that I think is original, this cable needs to come in from the lower right, like this. This bracket was slightly left of straight down like that. Then this cable comes in about like that. So there's two things here that don't work yet. The first is that little rivet has to be removed. It's a Kohler part, and it works like a stop for that disc. But in this application, it just gets in the way. The second thing is this bracket needs to be bent out so the cable's not rubbing the block right here. Well, that's closer to what we want, but the travel's limited. When the wire is extended, it hits the brass bushing. and when the wire retracts, it hits the cable mounting bracket behind the disc. Another thing is the mounting bracket's at the wrong angle. If you put a screw in there, the cable would not be pointing at the disc where you want it. So I need to bend the cable bracket to match the angle of the cable mount. I want to hold on to this part above where the bend is, so I need a spacer in the vise. The spacer should be parallel to the top of the vise, with the part gripped so it bends in the right place. I'm going to try to bend this about half as much as the first bend. The angle matches the cable bracket pretty well, but the mounting arm has to bend out more so the cable clears the block. Okay, I bent the part some more in both places, just like I showed before, but I went farther. So now I think this bracket will hold the cable in the right place. I need to tighten this screw to see how it works when I move the throttle lever. There's not much room back there, so I'm going to see if I can hold the nut with these long pliers. Well, it works if I come in from the other side like this. I want to put the arm on to see if this is going to work. Don't forget to put the spring in the slot. With the linkage attached to the carburetor, the spring might not line up with the slot too well, so you can move the throttle position to rotate the disc and get it within range. I always want a little gap behind it and then snug the nut up. Then I go through the regular governor adjustment procedure. Rotate the shaft counterclockwise with pliers. Hold down on the wrench with your finger to move the arm in the counterclockwise direction. And that also holds the shaft in position while you tighten the nut. I move the throttle to the idle position because that's where I check for no tension on the linkage. There's no tension from the cable, but it feels a little sluggish. Everything looks okay. This design allows you to adjust the cable from this end. This cable's kind of kinked up, so I'm going to straighten it a bit. I want to be able to move the sliding clamp easily on the cable while I'm adjusting it. When you're adjusting a throttle cable, you want to adjust it in the idle position. The throttle lever has an idle position. In this case, it's down against that stop. When it's against that stop, I expect to be able to flop this linkage back and forth against the idle stop at the carburetor. I mentioned before that I had to move this cable to the next hole to get more travel. Now I can't go any farther until I take care of that. I have the cable in the next hole. So now if I move the throttle lever to the stop, I should be able to flop the linkage back and forth. But remember, I said this linkage felt sluggish, and it was because the throttle shaft was sticking in the hole. So I sprayed some WD-40 around the shaft, and now my linkage flops like I want it to. You can see how the bend in the wire lets it get around the brass nut. So that bend has to be in the right place. That's what I want to see there. When I move the throttle lever from idle, first the carburetor goes to full throttle position. As the lever continues, the spring adds more pressure, asking the governor to apply more throttle. The spinning weights inside the engine are asking the governor to apply less throttle. When those two forces are equal, the throttle stops moving to hold that speed. When I move the lever back to idle, the lever should hit the stop, and at that point I should be able to flop the carburetor linkage, like this. I don't want the throttle linkage to be forcing the carburetor to the idle position. That's the governor's job. And that linkage slop there shows me that it's not bottomed out. And that's it. That's how I adjust my governor linkage and carburetor linkage. Now the carburetor still needs adjusted, and the points might need adjusted, but the linkages are good to go. Alright, that's it.